It is Sunday, August 4th, which means that I'm live again just talking about my journey to complete my first 200-mile race. This is week 2 out of 35. So last week was the first time I went live. Uh, that was at the end of my first week of actually training for this. Before that, I had just kind of been running randomly. And so this is the end of week 2. I always start my week on Sunday and end it on Saturday. So I've just completed week 2 of my training program and wanted to address a couple things and kind of share how things have gone for week 2. So in this session, I don't know how long it'll be, hopefully not too long, but I just want to cover why I've signed up for a 200-mile race. Normally when I tell people that, they tell me that I'm crazy and ask me what the hell I'm doing. So I'm going to answer that question as well as how I'm training for this because, uh, I mean, a couple years ago, even before I had heard of ultra marathons, when I heard that somebody was doing a 50-mile race, I'm like, how the heck do you even train for that? I mean, and even back 5 years ago, I had no idea how to train for a marathon. I didn't know what that looked like. So just want to share my experience. I've owned the farthest distance I've trained for up to this point is a 50-mile ultra marathon, and now I'm doing a 100-mile event in December and a 200-mile event next March. So want to kind of share some things about how I'm preparing for my training, and hopefully you can learn something from it. So the first thing, why am I doing this? I love to challenge myself. I love to experience new things, to give myself an opportunity, a new opportunity to be resourceful in ways that I haven't been before, to become more resilient, and to train myself to be more consistent and accountable. That last part, consistent and accountable, that's something that I have definitely struggled with over, I don't know, the last 10, 12 years, maybe my entire life, is to be consistent and uh, extremely accountable to myself. And so I like to challenge myself to do physically demanding things and then put together a training program and test my ability to actually stick to that. Now, I know that you're thinking, oh, well, Adam, you could do that with a half marathon or with a marathon. Like, you don't need to run 200 miles to be able to do that. And you're right. You're absolutely right. And I've done these little experiments throughout my life. And so I've trained for a few marathons before. Like I said, I've done the 50-mile ultra marathon last year. And each time has been a different experience, has taught me completely different things, like the journey to the race, like the actual training part of it, being consistent, developing the discipline to stick to the training plan, and to be consistent in the execution of it. And yeah, just taking it even further and further and further obviously demands me to continue to be disciplined for a much longer period of time. And like I said, each experience has been different. So I've learned something new about how what discipline means to me and how I need to kind of structure my life in order to have the best chance at being disciplined without ignoring other things in my life, without burning out, and while doing things to the best of my ability. So I'm taking the things I've learned from those other experiences, trying to implement them with this training schedule, and then putting those to the test again and trying to learn new things about how I can get the best out of myself over a consistent period of time. Uh, if any of you, for those of you that have followed me before, I like to challenge myself physically, mentally, emotionally, sometimes even spiritually. And when I did the 50-mile ultra marathon last year, it was a huge mental test. I think a lot of people in the ultra running community will say to you, once you get past a certain distance, it's just mental, like it's all mental. And I was able to kind of recite a couple mantras to myself just over and over and over again to remind myself of what I was trying to accomplish and to remain calm and to keep going. And there were other lessons like my wife and I, my wife Shelby and I, had to rely on each other in such a completely different environment than anything that we had been through before. So there was a lot of testing in our communication and our reliability on one another. And it was so much fun. I remember, I think it was like halfway through the race. Um, I came up to an aid station and and Shelby was there waiting for me. And I was like, seeing your face every 2 to 3 hours is just like the most amazing thing in the world right now. And pushing myself like this challenges me physically and mentally, but it also just makes me appreciate the people that are in my life so much more. And I love to be able to do this. One of the things I mentioned too was to be resourceful. And what I mean by that is, if you if you do the same thing over and over again, or you're in the same routine, you don't give yourself the opportunity to solve new problems in ways that you haven't solved before, or to accomplish something by doing it in a new way. And when I had a friend of mine on the podcast, on the Comfort by Discomfort podcast a couple years ago, his name's Josh. He's awesome. Uh, he had said, he likes to put himself in situations that are a bit unfamiliar and where the opportunity to be resourceful exists. And essentially, what he was trying to say was that he wants to uh, give himself the opportunity to use his experience and his skills and his knowledge to solve new problems, to figure things out that he hasn't necessarily faced before. And that quote, as you can tell, has stuck with me over the last 2 years. So thank you, Josh, for that. And now it's a big part of what I do and why I do things. In terms of, so that's really the why I'm doing this. And oh, and the last reason, sorry, is I mean, this is a big personal journey for myself. So there's a lot in it for me when it comes to that. In terms of why I'm sharing the story, is to try and inspire somebody out there to push themselves and to challenge the limits that they've put on themselves, because I've done it many times. I know of other people that have done that many times, where you tell yourself you can't do something, or you can't accomplish something, or it's too hard. And I mean, this is perfect timing, because watching the Olympics, you hear about every single incredible story of what people have overcome and what they're able to accomplish once they put their minds to something. And if you keep telling yourself over and over again you can't do it, you're going to be right. And so I'm sharing my journey, hopefully to inspire somebody out there to question what they tell themselves, and to try and remove one of those barriers, or to change the way that they speak to themselves just a little bit, so that they can try to accomplish something that they haven't accomplished before. So if that's you, fantastic. If that's somebody else, that's amazing too. So now let's move into the how. How the heck am I training for this? Because 200 miles obviously sounds ridiculous. Like uh, it sounds really far, and it is. For those of you, since I was born in Windsor, Ontario, for those of you in that area, 200 miles is like 320 something kilometers. So that's like driving on the 401 from Windsor pretty much to Toronto. So that's how far this race is going to be, which, when I put it that way, sometimes I question myself in terms of why I'm doing this. But obviously, it's a very far distance. I've only trained for a 50-mile race. And so that question, I've asked myself that question many times: how the heck am I going to train for this? And there are really four main components to my training. There's obviously running or moving. Number two is strength training. Number three is recovery. And number four is nutrition. So I'm going to get into those each one of those a little bit right now. I'll probably spend some more time getting into the details in later episodes, or later live streams. But yeah, so those are the four main components. And what's important here is that uh, when I trained for a marathon, that race is 26.2 miles. And typically the way that training is done for a marathon is that 3 to 4 weeks before the actual event, you should be running your longest distance, which is around 20 or 21 miles. So it's approximately, what is that, 80%? Approximately 80% of the total race distance. Now, with when you get into ultra marathons, you can't necessarily just extrapolate the training plan to just increase the distance. So I've read a lot of the same thing. I've talked to a number of people in the trail running community, and they say the same thing. Like, for example, if I was to do a 50-mile event, 3 or 4 weeks before the 50-mile event, I would have to run 40 miles in order to just train for that. Now, uh, obviously that's a lot of miles, right? And it's going to take a tremendous amount of time. And so instead of doing something like that, what I've learned is that many people, instead of doing one day where they run 40 miles, what they'll do is they'll do what's known as a back to back, where on back to back days, let's say Saturday and Sunday, they'll run 15 to 20 miles on Saturday and then 15 to 20 miles on Sunday. And the whole purpose of this is to obviously get more time on your feet, but then to also uh, get used to running when your legs are actually tired. So, extrapolating that further, when we go to 100 miles, like, I'm not going to train for a 100-mile event by running 80 miles in one day. Right, like, there's things that I have to sort of adjust when I get to further and further distances. So that was sort of one of the main things. um what I learned last year from running my 50-mile event is that when I was training for that one, I, instead of running like 4 or 5 times a week, I actually only ran twice a week. I only had about 3.5 months to train for that event. So I didn't have a lot of time, and I wanted to make sure that, one, I was building up my strength, and two, I wasn't burning myself out. So I adjusted my training plan. I did sort of like one short to medium length run in the middle of the week, and then every Saturday I would do a long run, right? And I literally started at 5 miles and then just went up from there. And I think my longest run before the 50-mile event was about 28 or 29 miles. I did that run had 5,000 feet of elevation gain, because the 50-mile event, there are a lot of hills, so I needed to train for that. In addition to only running twice a week, what I would do was do at least one uh, strength training session, specifically my lower body. I wanted to build up strength in my legs, and that made a huge difference. That was something that I did not necessarily do in my first uh, when I was training for my first three marathons, my first three events, and so it was very beneficial, and it's something that I've carried forward here. So let's get into each of these four components. When we talk about running specifically, one of the most important things that I've come across, that I've learned, is this idea of polarized training. And this is a method of training that is specifically effective for endurance athletes. And I'm just going to read a little blurb about it, just so that I get all the details, and then I'll kind of explain in maybe in more simple terms what it means. So it says that polarized training is a method of training that involves focusing on two opposite ends of training intensity. In the case of running, this would typically mean doing a significant amount of lower intensity or aerobic training, coupled with a smaller amount of high intensity training or anaerobic training. The low intensity training helps to build the aerobic system, while the high intensity training helps to improve anaerobic fitness and power. By training at these two extremes, runners can improve their overall fitness and performance more effectively than by doing mostly moderate intensity training. It goes on to say polarized training is thought to be particularly effective for endurance athletes, as it allows them to build both their aerobic and anaerobic systems simultaneously. This can help them to improve their endurance and speed, as well as their ability to recover from hard workouts. In addition, by doing the majority of training at low intensity, runners may be able to avoid overtraining or training errors, which can be common problems for endurance athletes and possibly lead to an increased risk of injury. So, the general guideline is that for all of my training, 80% of it will be low intensity. And then the other 20% will either be moderate or high intensity, probably split evenly 10% for each of those, for 10% for moderate and then 10% for high intensity. And the reason for this is because when you're doing an ultra marathon, the majority of people are simply trying to finish the race. We're not trying to break any speed records or anything like that. Now, there are some people that are ridiculously fast. I volunteered at a 200-mile event in April of this year. My wife and I both did. And the person who finished in first finished a 200-mile race in 49 hours, which means that they were averaging more than just a little bit higher than 4 miles per hour over 49 hours, which is just absolutely incredible. I'm not trying. I'm not trying to do that. I'm simply trying to finish this race. I'm trying to get to the finish line in one piece, potentially. And so with that, I need to essentially get my body used to running as many miles as possible. Get my body used to being on my feet uh, for as long as I possibly can. And so, because of that, high intensity training or moderate intensity training all the time is not necessarily going to help me do that. It's going to increase my risk of injury. So, training at a lower intensity will allow me to get more miles in or more time on my feet and allow me to recover faster, um, and that way I can progress, right? And then I'm still going to be training moderate intensity or high intensity 20% of the time, so that will allow me to improve my anaerobic fitness and power, or help me to become more efficient at running. Okay, so that's one of the main things that I've used to create my training plan. So essentially, if you were to look at, for every 10 activities that I do, whether it's running or playing hockey or doing yoga or strength training, 8 out of every 10 activities should be at a low intensity. Now, there is a general way to sort of calculate that. One of the ways, actually, there's two main ways that I use to sort of gauge that. One is by calculating my lactate threshold, and so lactate essentially builds up in your muscles when the harder and harder that you work. Your lactate threshold is essentially the point where your body can't get rid of lactate as fast as it's being produced, which eventually leads to fatigue. So, operating or training below that lactate threshold can essentially allow you to train for longer periods of time and recover faster, right? Basically, that's a definition of running at a lower intensity or training at a lower intensity. So a very simple way to calculate that, one commonly used method, it's not super specific, but it's a general calculation that can help you to figure that out very quickly, is called the MAF method. And essentially all it is you take the number 180 and you subtract your age. So I'm 31, so uh, that number would be 149. So if I generally keep my activity below one, if I keep my heart rate, sorry, below 149 or 150 when I am training, then I am operating in a lower intensity. The second way that I use to calculate that is called rate of perceived exertion, or RPE. And essentially, this is a very subjective scale. Essentially, at the end of a run, I ask myself, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much effort do I feel like I exerted to complete that activity? So 1 being, a very, very light walk, and 10 being a flat out sprint. What effort did I have to exert um, to complete that run? So on 80% of the time, I should be running where my rate of perceived exertion is about a 2 or a 3. I should finish that run and feel as if I could keep going. It didn't feel like it took that much effort to actually complete it. So, for example, reflecting on the past week, I did a pretty hard leg workout in the middle of the week. And because of that, my legs were feeling really tired Thursday and Friday. So, Saturday, yesterday, when I had my long run, instead of running, I just went for a hike. Now, that's one of the really important things when it comes to training for these longer distances is that you running or the speed at which you are running is not necessarily important most of the time, right? 80% of the time training at lower intensity. What's most important is that you are spending as much time as possible on your feet. So, although my legs were feeling tired and I really did not feel like running yesterday, I said, you know what? I'm going to go for a hike. I had 11 or 12 miles yesterday. I think I did 11.8 miles. Hiking took me just over 4 hours. My heart rate was very low. I think my average heart rate was about 103. So, obviously, quite below that 149 threshold. And it allowed me to get the time on my feet, get my body used to spending more and more and more time on my feet, rather than just going out there and trying to run quickly and and maybe potentially leading to burnout down the road. When I trained for my second marathon in 2020, I was doing everything at moderate to high intensity. I didn't know any of the things that I'm telling you right now. I was running 5 times a week, and I was also working anywhere between 10 to 14 hours for a consulting company at the time. And I burnt out after 2 months of training, completely burnt out. And so I am learning from my experiences and not doing that. So, in terms of creating a training plan or running for miles, how many miles am I running sort of per week? Well, up before July, the most I had run at one point for in one run was only 7.5 miles. It's not like I'm running 25 miles every weekend or something like that. And now I'm just like, oh, let's just, bump that up a little bit. No, after my ultra marathon in December of last year, took some time off running, a little off season, and then slowly kind of got back into running over the last couple months. Before the middle of July, the farthest that I had run in at one time was about 7.5 miles. July 20th, I did an 18-mile trail running event in Pelham, Alabama. And that one was really tough. I did one 9 mile loop. I wasn't sure if I was going to do the second 9 miles, and my legs were cramping. My legs were really cramping during the second half. So now I'm basically kind of building up from there. So the general rule of thumb is that your total mileage for the week shouldn't increase by more than about 10%. So if you ran 20 miles last week, you shouldn't run more than 22 miles this week. Now, that's a guideline, of course. If you run 22.5, it's not like your legs are going to fall off, but it's a general guideline to ensure that you're increasing gradually. Because one of the most important things about this training is that you are gradually building your base, is what it's called. Building your base, making sure that you're getting your body used to moving for this length of time and for this many miles. So low intensity, lots of miles, and just increasing gradually over time to make sure that your body can handle it. So week one, the full week one was 2 weeks ago. In that week, I ran 18 miles. In this past week, I did 20.5 miles across 2 runs and one hike, like I had just mentioned. So I did 20 and a half. I'm supposed to have a another trail run, like trail running event in 2 weeks. It's a 20-mile event. I may or may not be in town for this one. So because I've got a 20-mile event 2 weeks down the road, next week I've actually dialed the miles back just a little bit to give my body a little bit more time to recover for that longer event. So I've got 17 miles on the schedule for this week coming up. Alrighty. Last thing I want to mention here is that in terms of how I've sort of pieced together this training, right now I have training basically scheduled until the first week in October, second week in October. The reason for that is because at that point in time, me, my wife, and my father-in-law are going to Italy for 6 weeks for his retirement trip. And so that is going to be a very, very interesting challenge. I need to be very meticulous in how I plan my training while we are spending that much time away from home in a country that I've been there, but I'm not extremely familiar with it. So there are definitely going to be some challenges when it comes to putting my training plan together. So I've got my training plan put together until mid-October, basically. And the way that I've done that, there's three main ways. One is just from some of my experience so far with training for longer races. Number two, one of the resources that I found most helpful, there's this website called marathonhandbook.com. The person that runs the website, his name, I believe, I'm just scrolling down here, is Thomas Watson. He is a certified running coach. There are a ton of articles on training for a 5K, a half marathon, a marathon. There's articles on cross training and strength training and recovery and body weight exercises for runners, all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of free resources on his website. Um, you sign up for his newsletter and you get access to quite a bit. Now, if you do want to take it to the next level, he does have some paid plans. Those are available on a website called trainingpeaks.com. The free plans have really been a great sort of starting point for me. And so I've used those plus my experience and plus number three, conversations with other people, some of my friends in the trail running community that have helped me sort of put together a plan for at least the next few months. Once I start getting closer and closer to October, I will have to put together, I will have to kind of finish that training plan, putting together that training plan to ensure that I'm doing all the things that I need to do, even when I am sort of out of the country. So those are the resources that have been really helpful for me. That's sort of an overview on how I'm putting together the running portion of this. The second component of this training plan is strength training. So as I mentioned, the first three marathons that I didn't do any strength training. The first marathon that I did, I think I had been doing strength training earlier in the year in 2019, but when it came time to the summer, I was traveling quite a bit and wasn't necessarily doing as much strength training. And then when one of my friends, Lucas, challenged me to run a marathon, I just kind of started doing that. I wasn't doing as much strength training. And obviously, you can see that, you would think that every runner would be doing strength training. But that's not how I started. I was like, oh yeah, I need to run. So I'm gonna go run. And yes, it was obviously a great thing to do, but strength training can be super, super beneficial in terms of helping you gain strength in your lower and upper body to ensure that you're training your anaerobic system and ensuring that as you get stronger you can actually become a much more efficient runner. And I think that that's where I've seen the most progress. Last year when I was training for my 50 mile ultra, I only did 1 day of strength training a week, just trained my legs once a week. Sometimes I think sometimes I did it twice, but I did it once a week at for sure. And even that really, really helped me. I just did one heavy leg day every single week, and it really helped me, especially because the ultra that I was training for, there was a lot of elevation change. So there was a lot of walking uphill using my quads, hamstrings, my glutes, my calves to really power myself up the hill. So strength training absolutely helped. Now, if you're anything like me, uh, either right now or before, you've probably experienced a lot of confusion when it comes to strength training or when it comes to health and fitness as a whole, because there are so many things out there, so many pieces of information. It can be kind of hard to determine what's important and what you need to do. And I came across a podcast earlier this year, and it has helped me tremendously when it comes to strength training and nutrition. Nutrition's component number four in this sort of for this training. So I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But for strength training, this was super helpful. So the podcast is called Fitness Stuff for Normal People, and it's hosted by Tony and Mariana. And you can find them at fitnessstuffpod.com. They are incredible. The whole premise of the podcast is to focus on what is based in science, and that way we can focus on what's important. And because of that, it has eliminated many, many things in my head around what are the best ways to work out or to train, or when I get into it later, how I fuel my body. How do I go about doing that? What foods are really good? What foods are really bad? And everything in between. So, when it comes to strength training specifically, Tony and Mariana, for their podcast, they have a premium version. It's only $5 a month. And it actually gives you access to a number of different training programs. I think there's 4 or 5 different training programs. Some of them are more focused on upper body, some of them are more focused on lower body, some of them are focused on push pull exercises, right? So there's a number of different sort of breakdowns for those training programs. But what's super important is there's really two things. Number one, if the way that they differentiate it between they make a number one is they make an important differentiation between working out and training. So they define working out as simply kind of going into the gym and being like, yeah, okay, I'm not sure what I want to train today. Am I going to do chest, arms? Yeah, maybe. And I don't know what sets I'm going to do. I don't know how many sets or reps of each exercise I'm going to do. So it's kind of random, right? It's not very structured. Whereas training is a very structured approach where you're essentially doing the same exercises week after week after week and trying to apply progressive overload. Progressive overload simply means that you are putting those same muscles under more and more tension each and every week. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that every week you are lifting heavier weights. Maybe you're doing more reps, or maybe when you do bicep curl, you're dropping the weight a little bit slower, so that way your arm is under tension for a longer period of time. I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but they in their podcast they talk a lot about what's important when it comes to training. And then, like I said, for only $5, you can actually have access to their training programs, which is phenomenal because these training programs are 12-week programs. They're really well thought out. They will help you to know exactly what you're doing at the gym. You can customize them. So I downloaded one of their programs that is upper body, lower body. So there's essentially 3 different lower body workouts and 3 different upper body workouts every week. And so I've basically just picked lower body one and upper body one, and I'm doing that over sort of the next 12 weeks because I'm weightlifting in the gym 2 times per week. That's what I can do right now. But if you're somebody who wants to just hit the gym super hard, you can go there, download one of their plans, and do 3 lower body and 3 upper body workouts every week. And the plan will help you to apply progressive overload and to train instead of work out where you're kind of doing something random. So they've been super, super helpful in helping me understand exactly sort of what I need to do in order to increase my strength over time. So, uh, fitnessstuffpod.com, Tony and Mariana. You'll probably never watch this, but if you do, hi, and thank you so much for everything that you do because it is extremely helpful. Component number 3 of training is recovery. And based on what I've said about strength training, you will probably already guess that for the first 3 marathons that I did, there was no recovery involved. And you would be right if you guessed that. The first marathon I did, just running 4 times a week and had no idea what I was doing. I performed pretty well, but I did experience a couple injuries. The second marathon that I completed, I had it in my goal. It was a very I don't know if it was completely ego driven, but it was partially ego driven decision where I wanted to run my second marathon in under 4 hours. And so I went on trainingpeaks.com, found a plan, paid like $25, got this training plan, and I just tried to kind of go as hard as I could. And I was running 5 times a week, working crazy hours online because everything was remote at that time. And I wasn't doing any strength training and I wasn't doing any recovery. And that led to a pretty serious injury. My lower back, it literally felt like it was compressed. My wife joked, we weren't married at the time, we were dating, and at the time she joked that I literally ran my ass off. Like I was not doing any training, and so eventually my ass just deteriorated. And what that meant was that my muscles, I wasn't developing my muscles as much as I should have been, and so my body was trying to compensate for those inefficiencies, and eventually led to injury. So my lower spine literally felt like it was compressed, and my pelvis was probably out of whack as well. And like I said, my body just wasn't strong enough to do what I was asking for it to do. So I had a lot of pain in my lower back. And a big part of that was avoiding recovery. And I was very stubborn. So I did 2 months of training. I burnt out. I had this injury. I stopped running completely. And you would think that, oh, Adam, did you spend the next 2 months just doing recovery? No, I spent the next 2 months pretending like my injury didn't exist. And that was obviously a very stupid decision. I avoided recovery because I knew it was going to be painful. And I hate being sidelined, or I used to hate being sidelined. It still bothers me now, but I have a slightly different perspective when it comes to it. But at the time, I did not like it. Did not like it. I wanted to avoid it. I just said, you know, it'll get better on its own. So I didn't do any stretching, didn't do any foam rolling or recovery. I didn't do any I didn't go see a doctor or anything like that. I simply just kind of lived with the injury. And it got so bad to a point where we were staying at my father-in-law's house at the time, and he has those like big Culligan water jugs, right? Where that he drinks from, and I could not pick up one of those jugs to put it on top of the dispenser. Like it hurt my back to be able to do that. It took almost every ounce of me to be able to do that, and I felt it in my lower back. And avoiding it obviously never made the injury go away. So after that, my wife made it very clear. She was like, Adam, I love you. I will support you through everything. I will never tell you not to do something, even if you want to run 200 miles. I will not tell you no. However, if you do not take all of the components of your training seriously, I will not be there to like support you on the sidelines, because you are literally destroying your body for no reason. You want to do crazy shit? I don't care. That's fine. I will cheer you on as long as you take all the components of your training seriously and make sure that you actually do the recovery work, because you know you need to do it. So this is what I'm saying to you. I'm not going to stop you, but I will not be there on the sidelines, or I will not be one of your crew members if you choose to approach training the way that you are approaching it now. And that was a big wake up call for me. So, gentlemen, if your girlfriend, fiance, wife has ever said anything like that to you, they know what they're talking about. So when it came time to training for my ultra last year and for this ultra now, recovery is a big component of my training program. So 2 days a week, I will do a recovery yoga session. I'll also do a breathwork session. So I follow the Wim Hof breathing method. Some of you may have heard him before, the Iceman. So he's got an app, the Wim Hof app, which has interactive breathing exercises. So I'll do some of that to uh, really try and um, challenge myself in terms of breath work. I know that breathing is uh, one of my weak areas, so I want to improve that, and it also helps me to really reset my nervous system and decompress. So those are two big components of recovery. But then on running days or even or lifting days, I have a Theragun, or like what are these called? Theraguns, the massage tools, right? So I have one of those. So I use that on a daily basis, as well as a foam roller. So I'll use that quite often to ensure that I am trying to optimize my recovery, because it's pretty ironic, and I laugh at it sometimes, how we know that there are things that are good for us, like foam rolling, and we know it's only going to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but we still avoid it. We're like, no, I'm not putting myself through that 5 minutes of discomfort to feel better for the rest of the day. And then once you say that out loud, you're like, you're just being an idiot. Just do it. So I've started to make that a big component of my recovery. So those are really the three main things: the recovery yoga, especially on off days. Some days I'll even do it on a workout day, depending on how I'm feeling. Number two is the breathing exercises. And number three is the foam rolling and massage gun, because all of that helps. Oh, and every now and then, well, I would say it's probably going to be more regular, is ice baths. So I'll do an ice bath after a really long run. So if I run, I did an when I did an event 2 weeks ago, the 18-mile event. Later that day, took an ice bath. And it felt amazing. I love it. So those are components, and warm Epsom salt baths. So I'll take hot Epsom salt baths sometimes to help my muscles relax as well. So 4 things for recovery, a lot more than there were before. The last component of my training plan is nutrition. And so you'll hear this all the time. I mean, whether you're a runner or not, you'll hear how nutrition is super important. If you're ever trying to get a six pack, they'll say, you know, their abs are developed in the gym, but you can see them in the kitchen, or something like that. I don't remember the exact saying, but essentially saying that you can build the muscle all you want, but you're never going to see the muscle unless you get your shit together with your nutrition. And I, in my life, have sometimes gone to an extreme with nutrition, not not to the point where I have necessarily like an eating disorder or anything like that, but to a point where I am simply like, like added sugar. I don't want to touch it. No, I want to have like 10 grams of less of added sugar, for example, or, you know, going through a phase where it's um, like animal protein. Yeah, I want some of it, but I don't want to eat a bunch of it because it's bad for me. And so, anyways, I've been through a number of different sort of phases. And again, just like training in general, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to nutrition. And I've had a lot of that confusion as well, where I don't necessarily know what's important. And it can be frustrating, because all you want to do is better your life, but there's so many different things on the internet about what you need to do. Oh, you need to take athletic greens, or you need to take, this mushroom substitute instead of drinking coffee. 1 cup of coffee is good for you, but 3 cups of coffee is going to put you in the grave. Like, there's so much information out there. So, um, the podcast that I mentioned earlier, Fitness Stuff for Normal People podcast, super, super helpful. Tony and Mariana, again, focus on science based facts and science based approach when it comes to nutrition. And listening to some of their episodes has completely changed the way that I've approached my nutrition, and it's changed my relationship with food as well. It's even more positive than it has been over the last 5 to 8 years. And so, what's been super helpful about their podcast and the information that I've learned the most is a couple things. Number one is, uh, first of all, understanding how many calories I need to consume in order to maintain my weight. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can do this. Number one, you could, if you have a fitness watch of any kind, you can keep that on basically 24/7, except for charging, of course, and try and basically take a week or 2 weeks. 2 weeks is usually the benchmark to see how many calories that you burn in a day. And obviously, calories are not just burned from running on the treadmill. You burn calories just by standing still because your body is still doing things, right? So your some sort of fitness device can help you to calculate how many calories you burn on a regular basis. And then if you want to maintain your weight, simply consume that same amount of calories every day, and your weight will not fluctuate. Right? Your weight changes based on your calories that you consume versus the calories that you burn. And I know that sounds super simple, and it is, but we're not always taught that. And we're not always told it's that simple because everybody wants to sell us a new product on how we can quick fix our nutrition in our body, right? But in terms of weight, for the most part, right? I'm not in the medical field, so there may be some exceptions to this, but for the most part, if you if you consume the same amount of calories that you burn, your weight's going to stay the same. The second way to do this, and maybe you can do a combination of these, but if you don't have a fitness device, is to simply get a scale and in the morning, every morning after you pee, weigh yourself. Try to weigh yourself at the same time every day. Weigh yourself for 2 days and uh, try to. So there. Sorry, let me say one thing first. On the Fitness Stuff for Normal People podcast on their website, they have a lot of free calculators, so you can go on there and put in your age, your weight, your height, how many steps you think you take per day, how many hours you think you exercise a week, just estimates to try and get a baseline for how many calories you burn a day. And then to test that, what you would do is simply consume that many calories a day for 2 weeks and weigh yourself every morning after you pee at the same time. And if your weight has changed up or down, then you adjust your calories based on that. So if you consume 2,000 calories a day, but you've lost 5 pounds in 2 weeks, then obviously you're not consuming as many calories. You're consuming fewer calories than you should be to maintain your weight. The reason why this is important is because once you figure out what your maintenance calories are, right? How many calories you need to consume to remain the same weight, then you can calculate sort of how many grams of protein, fat, and carbs you need a day to properly fuel your body. So I said them in that order specifically. So through the podcast, Tony and Mariana basically said we really, on a general basis, we as humans really underestimate the amount of protein that we get each and every day. We Did I say that right? We overestimate. We think we get way more protein than we're actually getting, and we underestimate how many calories we consume uh, from fat. So the best way to really do this is to ensure that, let's say for me, I'm strength building, I'm trying to gain strength, right? Gain some muscle while also doing training for this ultra marathon, while also doing a lot of running. So I'm in the gym a couple days a week. I want to make sure that my muscles are able to repair themselves as fast as possible to ensure that my body can recover and I can keep training at a healthy level for as long as I can. So he has a calculator as well for determining how many grams of protein is sort of optimal for you to consume. And so for me, I weigh 180 pounds, so I'm trying to consume just around that in grams of protein. So my goal is 175 grams of protein every single day, and then the rest of my calories will obviously come from carbs and fat. And what I've done is essentially almost kind of, I think I've almost split that to make sure that I'm getting, I think it's around 270 grams of carbs and then 85 grams of fat. And again, the reason I'm doing that is because number one, the protein's most important. Number two is the carbs are what my body will use as energy, especially when I'm running. So I want to make sure that I have enough carbs in my body to fuel that. So what can also be confusing is how to track how many calories you consume. Again, there are a lot of apps out there, and or you could do it manually. I did it manually for about a month and a half, and it was very tedious. I was able to do it, and my wife Shelby joined in as well, and it has actually really changed our perspective. We didn't When I used to hear about people saying that they track their macros, I was like, ugh, like you're going to be so specific with what you eat. You're not going to have any chocolate bars. You're not going to have any ice cream. You're just going to be so strict. You're not going to be any fun type of thing. That's how I used to sort of think of it. I used to think of counting macros as being very restrictive. But for me and Shelby, it's actually been the exact opposite. So I'll give you an example. When we started doing this, Shelby and I were both like, well, you know, we every morning when we have our coffee together, we always have, an Oreo or two. And it was like, well, we obviously don't want to cut those out. And not every night, probably every other night, every third night, we have like a little ice cream bar while we're watching a movie, or we have popcorn or something. And it's like, well, we don't want to cut those out or feel bad for eating those. So how can we actually just fit those in our plan? And so we took that approach. We're like, yeah, every night or every other night, I want to have an ice cream bar or a frozen Greek yogurt bar or something. So we built that into the plan, and because the important thing is I'm trying to hit my macro goals, I'm trying to hit my protein, carb, and fat goals. So the ice cream is like, when you break it down, it consists of those three components, right? Every food consists of those three components. And so I can just put that in my plan and not feel guilty about it. Now, again, I'm not going to eat, 5 or 10 of these ice cream bars every day and be like, oh, it fits in my plan. Like, obviously, there's still some balance to it. But the main thing is that we didn't want to be restrictive. The other thing that we've really learned is that we love sauce. We love ranch. We love barbecue sauce. We love different sauces to dip our food in, right? Spicy mayo or chipotle mayo. And what we realized was that very, very quickly with these sauces, your calories can go from 500 to 1,000, right? Like a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of mayo is 100 calories. And again, it's not to be like, oh, I'm never ever going to breathe on mayo. I'm never going to sniff mayo again or anything like that. It's simply saying, okay, could we create an alternative? Like, could we make our own sauce that is a little bit different? Because, like, if I have a sandwich and I'm, dipping it in spicy mayo, for example, and I'm trying to count calories and I have specific goals for protein and specific goals for fat, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I just, without even realizing it, I consumed, 20 grams of fat and 200 calories because I had some spicy mayo with my food. And now my sort of numbers are out of whack, right? Fat, each gram of fat is 9 calories, whereas each gram of protein and carbs is only 4 calories. So your calories can increase much, much quicker when you just increase the amount of fat that you're eating. So it actually allowed us to become more aware of what we were putting in our bodies. And we started making changes to better fit the lifestyle that we were trying to create, or that nutrition plan that we were trying to create. So, for example, Shelby, we went to the grocery store. We bought the Hidden Valley Ranch seasoning packet, which is 0 calories because it's just seasoning. And then Shelby made a ranch sauce out of it using Greek yogurt and cottage cheese, some of her seasoning, and maybe one or two other things. And because we're using low fat Greek yogurt and cottage cheese, now there's a lot more protein than there is fat. And the sauce is now maybe 50 calories instead of 100 calories. And so, you know, we basically don't want to feel guilty for putting sauce all over whatever it is that we're eating. And so those little changes have really been positive for us. So instead of feeling restricted, we actually feel like there's a lot more freedom as long as we're just taking the time to plan just a little bit and to kind of think about what we are consuming. So when it comes to tracking things, the thing that has helped me the most, there's this app called I don't know if it's chronometer or chronometer, but that's the one that I use. It's spelled Cronometer. And it's a free app. Now there is a paid version of it, of course, but that's more uh, for coaches that have multiple clients, and it gives them access to have multiple clients under their plan. But there's a free app that you can use. It has the barcode scanner, and it's got a library of like 5 million foods. So it takes a little bit of time to set up. It looks complicated at first. You open it and you're like, wow, there are a lot of things on here, right? But once you go through the app, and I might make a video to show how I did this. But once you go through the app and sort of just set up everything, it's actually really easy after that. You can simply, so when I make a yogurt bowl in the morning, when I have yogurt and some granola and a banana, all I do is pull up the app, scan in the yogurt, put how many grams of yogurt. So I do have a food scale, right? So I make sure that I weigh, on the back of the Greek yogurt, for example, it says 170 grams is one serving. So I'll put my bowl on the scale, zero it out, put 170 grams of yogurt in there, and then scan the yogurt with my app, put 170 grams, and it calculates the protein, fat, and carbs for me. And it shows me at the top how I'm tracking towards my goals and how many calories I've consumed for the day. And it's a much, much easier way of tracking the macros than to do it manually like I did for about a month and a half. So it's a free app. The reason why I found this one was because Fitness Pal, like My Fitness Pal, was also a good one. There's a free app. It's free, but only for a specific period of time. So I think it was like after 14 days, it wanted me to sign up for the premium version. And the premium version was like $80 a year. And at the time, I was just like, I think there's another app that I can find. So did some digging. I found this one. I've tested it out for the last 3 to 4 weeks, and it's been really good. It hasn't asked me to pay for a premium version at all. So I'm assuming that it is going to continue to be free. And like I said, once you get it set up, very easy to track. There's also an option to like input your own recipes. So let's say that my mom, for example, like she's kind of famous for making these granola bars that we used to take everywhere when we were younger at different sporting events. So if I wanted to make her granola bars, I could put that recipe into this app and like scan in each item, and it would tell me what the protein, fat, and carbs are. I can choose the serving size. So if I make a batch of a huge batch of granola bars and there's 24 bars in there, I can choose the serving size, and the app will calculate how much protein, fat, and carbs and calories are in each of the granola bars. That way, it just makes things a little bit more simple. So you could meal prep if you're into that, right? You could meal prep on Sunday, for example, put that recipe into the app, and then throughout the week, when you're eating that meal, all you would do is go on the meal, press your recipe, and put in how many servings you're having, and everything would be calculated. So, chronometer, whatever it is, has been super, super helpful. And like I said, tracking macros has actually really opened my mind to what consists of a healthy diet. I'm not concerned about doing like keto diet or cutting out added sugar completely or doing any of these different diets. If you found that works for you, it's fantastic, right? Everybody's different, of course. This is what has worked for me, and just mentally it makes me feel really good because I know I'm putting quality food into my body, and I know that the equation works, right? In my head, I'm an analytical thinker partially. And so the equation makes sense for me, right? Calculating, all right, protein's the most important. Once you figure that out, you can fill in the gaps with the other things. And, based on your activity level, here's how many calories you need to consume. Now, as my training increases, I am going to have to increase the amount of calories that I consume because I will be burning more, but that is for later down the line. Alrighty. We are at, what are we at? Almost an hour here. Fantastic. So, just a quick reflection on this past week of training, and then I'll wrap things up. So, this week, I completed 20.2 miles. This was across two runs, one outside, one on the treadmill, and one hike. The hike I did yesterday because my legs were really feeling it, but I still wanted to get out there. I did two strength sessions, so one lower, one upper body day, two yoga sessions. Again, these are low intensity, just helping me to move my body a little bit, maybe increase my mobility and get some stretching in. And I did two breathing sessions, like I said, the Wim Hof method. So, yeah, the strength training session that I did on Tuesday, oh my goodness, it was the most intense leg session that I've done in a while. So thanks, Tony and Mariana, for that. I in halfway through the session, it required me to max out on the leg extensions, and my quads were just on fire, absolutely on fire. And I actually didn't do the last two exercises in the workout because my legs were done. I couldn't walk anymore. So Tuesday was I was walking around like a duck for the rest of the day. Wednesday and Thursday my legs were still really sore, so I kind of switched up my recovery day. My recovery day is usually Friday. I made that Thursday so that I could do some foam rolling and light stretching and try to really get some blood circulating and recover from that leg workout because that was like the first kind of one that I did of that style. And then Friday did an upper body session and 5.7 miles on the treadmill. Like I said, it's just low intensity. So I found that, especially on the treadmill, when I put it at 4.5 miles per hour, I can just go. And one of the things that was really helpful is that, especially during ultra marathons, is that like it's okay to walk, right? Like people walk these events all the time, especially when anything is uphill, people are walking. They're not running up the hills. There's a saying that the people that run up the hills in ultras either win the race or they do not finish. And so for the majority of people, walking up hills is perfectly fine. I am one of those people. And so what I did on the treadmill, especially because my legs were still feeling it feeling it quite a bit, I would do 5 minutes of walking at 3 miles an hour and then 15 minutes of running at 4.5 miles per hour. And I just did that 4 times until I got to, 5.5 miles basically. It just allowed me to to kind of get through it while also keeping my heart rate low, right under that lactate threshold. That way I could just maintain that lower intensity. And then yesterday, again, because of the leg day and everything, I'm just trying to get the miles in. My legs were still really feeling it. And I made the decision. I was like, you know what? I just, in order to get these, if I run, I don't know that I'm going to get these miles in. I want to make sure that I'm spending as much time as I can on my feet. So I went for a nice hike, not too far from here at Swayback Bridge Trail. Beautiful trail. Saw some deer. I only saw like two people. Didn't even say hi to me, but I saw a bunch of deer. Spent some time in nature, and I always get inspired by nature because of just how beautiful it is, and there's always something to learn, right? Like this one time I was walking down a trail and I saw this tree, and it was growing in the side of like a in the side of the hill. And so it was growing up, and there was this giant boulder that stuck out. And obviously, the tree couldn't grow straight up. So it hit the rock basically, grew around the tree, and then kept growing. And I was like, wow, like that's a lesson for life right there. Just to be adaptable and to figure out a way to get through the obstacles that are in your way. So I'm always looking for inspiration from nature. Had a really wonderful walk yesterday, and I'm really happy I made the decision to simply walk, because in the past my ego would have told me, no, you have to run, you have to train hard. If you're not training hard, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. uh so, like, man up and do what you're supposed to do. And obviously sometimes that is helpful. In the case yesterday, it really wouldn't have been. And so I was really happy that I walked, because I got the miles in. I spent the four hours on my feet, and I've positively contributed to my training. All right, everybody. So that wraps up week 2. Spent a little bit longer than I thought I was going to on today's session, but I really wanted to go over just those 4 components of training. Like I said, hopefully those are helpful to some of you out there. If you have any questions, just please put them in the chat if you watch this live, or if you watch this afterwards, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions at a later session. And yeah, alrighty, that's week 2 in the books. Going into week 3 now, and I'll be back here next Sunday to just share some of the progress and to reflect on this week. So, sending you lots of love, and hope you challenge yourself this week.